I'll call to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, and it's a delight to welcome all 5 members of the Federal Communications Commission, fully installed and bright and shiny faces and ready to go today. We welcome you, and Chairman Wheeler and Commissioner O'Reilly, we especially welcome you and look forward to working with you to set the communications agenda for the United States. Federal Communications Commission is the arm of our government tasked with fostering some of the most important parts of our national economy, and among them the telecommunications industry, the video distribution industries, and the Internet. Given the economic significance of these industries, the charge from Congress to encourage competition, license our national spectrum assets, and facilitate technological advances is one that must be discharged with transparency, accountability, and a long view of the technological landscape. It is with this in mind that this subcommittee has worked over the last 3 years on efforts to improve the Commission's processes. As a subcommittee with jurisdiction over the Federal Communications Commission, we take this task very seriously and with great care to ensure the Commission not only remains a vital institution, but one that can serve as an example for other federal agencies of accountability and efficiency. A bipartisan majority of this subcommittee is deeply committed to this cause and is proud to have reported out a bipartisan FCC process reform bill to the full House of Representatives yesterday. Chairman Wheeler, it's clear you want to improve the agency. I've appreciated our conversations and your comments, and I'd like to commend you for turning your attention to this task as one of your first roles as chairman by asking one of your top advisors to review the FCC process and submit recommendations for improvement by early 2014. While there are a number of large proceedings currently pending at the Commission, many of which we will talk about today, I'm particularly concerned with returning the Commission to addressing some of its long overdue responsibilities. For example, despite multiple unsuccessful trips to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, the Commission's responsibility to address the media ownership proceeding remains unfulfilled. Additionally, licensing one of the original reasons for the creation of the Commission has fallen woefully behind. Of particular note is the tragic pace of processing of applications in the Commission's Media Bureau. Now, the AM radio industry has been clamoring for the ability to use FM translators to give new life to that classic medium. And I certainly appreciate what Commissioner Pai has done taking on this issue, and it's very good work. And as a former licensee, I actually know firsthand the Commission's been in no rush to address translator applications. In fact, my own application sat unresolved at the Commission for 10 years. To put this in context, while the Commission considered my application, my wife and I actually sold our radio stations, our son went off and graduated from college, and every full-power television station in the country converted from analog to digital broadcasting. Look, the Commission can do better than that. The Commission should do better than that, and I'm hopeful that our shared commitment will lead to improvement in that Bureau. As the only one on the panel with the unique experience of having been a licensee of commercial broadcast and still under your jurisdiction with my amateur radio license, which I'm set to renew for March, hopefully it'll get approved within 10 years, I'd like to offer 2 pieces of advice for you as you move forward with your change. First, where Congress has spoken, I urge you to heed the words in statute and reject calls to act in ways contrary to congressional intent. For example, in the incentive auction proceedings, some are calling on the Commission to exclude bidders from participating in the auction. Others still are calling for excessive guard bands in the attempt to end-run requirements to license, reclaim TV band spectrum. I'm just saying both are bad ideas. Second, I urge you to bear in mind that even seemingly small changes in your rules can have significant impact on the market. The Commission's recent decision to apply yet incomplete rules to its UHF discount has effectively frozen many plans for broadcast mergers and acquisitions. The problem here isn't that the Commission wants to update or needs to update the UHF discount rule. The problem is that absent a decision how, and importantly when, the Commission will move forward, it has pressed pause for an indefinite period of time. We all know that markets do not react favorably to this kind of open-ended uncertainty. On the other hand, I applaud the recent announcement on the schedule for the spectrum incentive auctions. Both the broadcast and wireless industries are waiting with bated breath to see how the FCC addresses this first-of-a-kind auction, to say nothing of the public safety agencies that are counting on the auction fund to fund FirstNet. The certainty of a timetable is good for both stakeholders and for the Commission. Finally, turning to those large proceedings the Commission has on its plate, We're looking forward to working with you to tackle the tough issues like the IP transition, universal service reform, and media ownership. Chairman Upton and I recently launched a large proceeding of our own, an initiative to update the Communications Act. Each of you brings a unique perspective to your work on the Commission: industry lobbyist, newspaper publisher, a couple of lawyers, even some former Legislative Hill staffers. That experience, combined with your expertise on the Federal Communications Commission staff and your own work on the Commission, will be valuable in our efforts as we work together to update and modernize the Communications Act. So Chairman Wheeler, we wouldn't want to demote you to the level of Congressman. Chairman Wheeler, yeah, our numbers aren't that great. Commissioner O'Reilly, we especially welcome you aboard the FCC, and Commissioners Clyburn, Rosenworcel, and Pai, welcome back, not only the Commission but before our committee. We thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to working together in this very critical sector of America's economy to spur further innovation, technology growth, and jobs. And with that, I will now yield to the ranking member of the subcommittee, my friend Ms. Eshoo from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. It's wonderful to see a full Federal Communications Commission before us. Welcome to each one of you. Special welcome to the new chairman. I think that you start out with 100% goodwill with everyone that is on this committee. I think our full committee. In fact, I think the Congress. We have, there have been many months where we didn't have a full commission. I want to once again thank Commissioner Clyburn for her exceptional leadership during that period of time. A welcome to each one of the commissioners, and of course to the newest Commissioner, Mike O'Reilly, who served on the other side of that table. When I first came to the committee, he was here when we began the Telecom Act, and now guess what? You get to trudge through that all over again, according to the chairman. So I guess there are some things that we just never finish with. As Chairman Wheeler announced last week, the Commission has made the upcoming incentive auction of broadcast television spectrum the top priority of the Commission, and I agree. This is a rare opportunity to auction beachfront spectrum under 1 gigahertz, and the FCC has to structure rules to promote a competitive wireless landscape and ensure carriers of all sizes, both regional and national, have an opportunity to bid competitively for licensed spectrum, and it has to be done right. It's the first time in the history of the world that an auction has been structured this way, and I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, and all the commissioners, your understanding the delicacy of this needing to be done right, well, and successfully. Similarly, recognizing the enormous economic and societal benefits of unlicensed spectrum, which is tucked away in one corner of my telecom heart, the FCC has an opportunity to structure a band plan that ensures a nationwide block of spectrum under 1 gigahertz dedicated for unlicensed innovation, with unlicensed spectrum being a critical tool to bring broadband to unserved areas, including rural America. This opportunity really must be seized. In addition to the important role the FCC has in freeing up more spectrum for mobile broadband, I'd like to highlight 4 issues that the Commission should make a top priority in 2014, and I think you're going to. First, during the 3 months since I released draft legislation, the message from individuals, communications companies, and consumer groups has been abundantly clear. Our video laws are in need of reform. They're broken. Independent of such legislation, the Commission does have an important responsibility to promote competition, consumer choice, and localism across the video marketplace. Second, I hope the Commission will continue its focus on modernizing the E-rate program to support a 21st century digital needs of our schools and libraries. In June, together with Commissioner Rosenworcel, we called for such an update, and I'm pleased that the White House and the FCC agree with us and have made this issue a key priority. We have to stay on it. We have to move, and we have to make it much better. It's got to be a 21st century plan. Third, the Commission should uphold, I think, the goals of Section 629 and ensure a vibrant, competitive retail set-top box market. A successor to the current cable card regime, whether by FCC rule or, more preferably, a voluntary industry agreement, will usher in a new generation of technologies that will give consumers greater choice and ensure that innovation flourishes. Finally, I'm pleased that the Commission has made the transition to next generation 911, as well as improving the indoor location accuracy of 911 calls, a key priority. In fact, later today, it's my understanding that the Commission will vote on an order to improve the reliability of 911, and I look forward to continued updates as the Commission proceeds with the implementation of Next Gen 911. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this morning's hearing. I look forward to the important testimony of Chairman Wheeler and each of the commissioners. Most importantly, I pledge to work with each of you to make America's communications sector the most effective and the most admired in the world. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton, from Michigan, I believe.
Great
not
state
Ohio.
of Michigan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, today we welcome a fully constituted FCC back to the Energy and Commerce Committee. The last time that we heard from the full commission was in July of 2012. So the FCC has regulatory authority over a sector of our economy that is critical to innovation, jobs, and our nation's global leadership in technology. Communications sector is also an integral part of our daily lives, connecting us to loved ones, alerting us to natural disasters, and entertaining and educating us every single day. As a regulatory agency of these industries, the FCC has the immensely important task of promoting growth and competition. Our hearing today will examine actions that the FCC has taken since the Commission last appeared and set expectations for the agency's future. As the oversight authority for the Commission, our committee works hard to ensure that the FCC functions to the benefit of American consumers as well as companies. We also want to make sure that this agency functions efficiently and transparently, as all government agencies should. I'm glad to say that this is not a partisan concern. Bipartisan majority on a voice vote of the full committee reported an FCC process reform bill yesterday that will help the FCC operate more openly and effectively, and we expect it to be on the House floor in the not-too-distant future. And the bill is needed. There are several stalled proceedings and ambiguous projects at the Commission that cause concern. To me and other members of the committee, we've sent a number of letters in the past months regarding media ownership proceedings. Subcommittee Vice Chair Latta has gone to the extent of drafting a bill to end the cable set-top box integration ban, a bill that seems to make a lot of sense and which perhaps the FCC should have considered doing a while ago. My concern and hope is that we can start a productive dialogue today with our esteemed witnesses on these and the many other important issues pending at the Commission. Commissioner O'Reilly, I'd like to welcome you back to the Energy and Commerce Committee, committee you know well, having once served here as the staff. And Chairman Wheeler, though you're from Ohio, this is often known as the Big House, now the Dingle Room. Hope you appreciate the green and white decor. And yes, we were for Sparty. Welcome back. And I yield to other members, Republican members.
The chairman now recognizes the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Communications, Mr. Latta from Ohio. Home of the Speaker of the House.
Well, I'm formerly number 2. But thank you very much for yielding, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to our commissioners for being with us today, and welcome to our newest members of the Commission. Really appreciate you having you here with us today. The communications and technology industry has been a consistent bright spot in the U.S. economy. It's created millions of American jobs, spurred significant investment, innovation, and most importantly, empowered consumers who are the driving force behind robust competition in the communications marketplace. As U.S.-based businesses lead the world in technological advancements, we have a responsibility to ensure the FCC fosters continued growth and development in the communications sector. This can be achieved by the FCC incorporating more transparency and accountability in its processes, operating within the bounds of its statutory authority, and acting upon legislation according to congressional intent. I look forward to continuing with Chairman Upton and the members of this committee, and also Congressman Green, on my H.R. 3196, which is the legislation to eliminate the integration ban on the set-top boxes and allow the marketplace to get to the next generation innovation without the regulatory barriers being put in front of it. I look forward to hearing the testimony today. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Tennessee, the vice chair of the full committee, for the remaining 40 seconds, if she wants it.
And I thank the chairman. I want to welcome all of our commissioners and publicly commend Commissioner Clyburn for the wonderful work that she did when she served as the acting chair. We appreciate that leadership. And Chairman Wheeler, we look forward to having you continue and to work in a collaborative manner to find results for the private sector. We would hope that the Commission will be proactive, not get beyond its mission, but to stay focused on your core mission. Pay attention to economic analysis. Look at cost-benefit analysis, and make certain that you don't suffer mission creep, which is casting a shadow over the private sector. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome the members of the Commission, Chairman Wheeler, and all the commissioners. And I also want to join in commending Commissioner Clyburn for the incredible job she did as acting chairwoman, from the industry agreement on interoperability to long overdue reforms on prison phone rates. Your brief chairmanship will be remembered for the remarkable amount you accomplished. Let me welcome Chairman Wheeler and Commissioner O'Reilly. I congratulate you on your appointment and confirmation, and we're pleased to have you here. You joined the FCC at a time when our country is undergoing dramatic and perhaps fundamental transformations in communications networks and technologies, and the decisions you make at the Commission will no doubt have lasting impact on our nation's communications landscape. At the top of the FCC agenda is the spectrum auctions authorized by the Public Safety and Spectrum Auction Act last year, and I'm pleased to see that the FCC is moving ahead to conduct the H-Block auction in January. In addition to allocating new wireless spectrum to address our nation's spectrum shortage, this auction will provide significant down payment for the nationwide interoperable public safety network. I also support, Chairman Wheeler, your recently announced timetable for the incentive auction. This auction has many layers of complexity, and I applaud your commitment to getting the technical issues right. Congress gave the FCC the tools to unleash the economic opportunities for both licensed and unlicensed spectrum, revolutionize public safety communications, ensure a vibrant and competitive wireless market, all the while protecting consumer access to free over-the-air television. And I think FCC must remain faithful to these goals as you implement the law. You also must bear in mind the principles undergirding the Communications Act as we consider the next evolution in our nation's wireless networks. Our values do not change with each successive generation of technology. Whether the infrastructure is copper or fiber optics, the Commission's charge is to protect and promote the long-standing goals of competition, universal access, and consumer protection. Chairman Upton and Walden had recently called for a multi-year examination of possible updates to the Communications Act, and I welcome the opportunity for a bipartisan consideration of these issues, and I hope the Commission will be a partner in this endeavor. In 2010, the Commission and this committee spent many hours working to preserve the principle of an open Internet. That process led to a sensible set of rules governing the broadband market that was supported by a diverse group of stakeholders and provided the foundation for the FCC's Open Internet Order. I believe the Open Internet Order will be upheld in the court, but whatever the outcome, I'll be looking to you to ensure that the Internet remains an open platform for innovation and economic growth. I want to, at this point, yield the balance of my time to my fellow Californians and good friend, Congresswoman Matsui.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Waxman, for yielding me time. It's wonderful to see the full complement of the Commission here today. I want to join in welcoming Chairman Wheeler, and who brings a wealth of knowledge experience to the FCC. And I'd also like to congratulate and welcome Commissioner O'Reilly. And I also would like to commend Commissioner Clyburn for her leadership during the interim period. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee is working diligently to find bipartisan solutions for smart and sound spectrum policy for our nation. We work to create a path for DoD to reallocate the 1755 to 1780 megahertz band. DoD and the broadcasters should be applauded for their leadership on a landmark sharing agreement. Moreover, I joined with Representative Guthrie to introduce H.R. 3674, the Federal Spectrum Incentive Act, which passed this committee yesterday in a bipartisan manner. The bill is first of its kind that offers a fresh approach that would create a federal spectrum incentive auction. I look forward to working closely with my colleagues and the administration and moving this bill to the floor. There are tough decisions ahead, and I want to encourage also the FCC to move it forward with the USF reform efforts. Modernizing the USF for broadband, particularly the Lifeline program, will provide a path towards universal broadband adoption in this country. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back balance for time. All time's been consumed. We'll now go to our witnesses. And again, we thank you very much for being here today and the public service work you're all undertaking. And Mr. Wheeler, as chairman of the FCC, we're going to lead off with you. So pull that microphone close, turn on the button, and you're good to go, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Eshoo, other members of the committee. It's a privilege to be before you today and a privilege to be joining my colleagues here, the full component of the Commission. I think we will make a great team, and I know that all of us are honored to be able to work with the quality men and women that make up the FCC. Today is my 39th day on the job. I have enjoyed the informal discussions that I've been able to have with many of you in the interim and look forward to today having even more complete discussions and to working with you afterwards. As I think everybody in their statements has indicated, we are in a very exciting time in the midst of a great network revolution. The lesson of history is that revolutions like that come chock full of challenges, and we're going to have to work together on how we address those challenges. We've tended to look at those challenges through three prisms, if you will, and to say, okay, how do we make sure, first of all, that what policies we adopt promote economic growth and maintain national leadership? And clearly at the root of those are issues such as competition and maintaining the necessary assets such as spectrum. The second prism is what we've begun to call the network compact. There has for a century developed a set of values that represent the relationship between those who operate networks and those who use networks. Those values must be preserved regardless of the type of the technology used in the network. And thirdly is the goal that networks work for everyone. That it's not what broadband, it's not just the delivery of broadband, but it's what broadband enables that is what is important. if we don't have 21st century education capabilities, if we don't make sure that Americans with disabilities have access to the capabilities of the new network, if we don't make sure that that tribal Americans have opportunities to use the new networks, then we have failed in our goals. So those three things: economic growth, the network compact, and what networks enable are the three pillars of policy. But at the heart of them is competition. It has become a joke, at least in my office, that I keep saying competition, competition, competition. But that is very much what we believe. Let me do a quick look at the three areas where the Commission is keeping pace with innovation, that innovative economy. First is process reform. The committee's bipartisan effort yesterday is significant and is noted and appreciated. On my second day, Mr. Chairman, as you noted, I began a process that will produce a report in 60 days. We're going to look at how to enhance accountability through deadlines and tracking systems, how to expedite the licensing process, like you referenced, how to shorten the processing time of applications for review, and Commissioner Pai has an interesting idea in that regard, how to streamline consumer complaint collection and a searchable database, which Commissioner Rosenworcel has been a champion of, and how to attack the backlog, as Commissioner Clyburn did when she was chairwoman. We also want to weed out outdated regulations, incorporate performance measures. The second focus is going to be, as you have all appropriately said, the spectrum auctions, especially the incentive auction. This committee, working with NTIA and DoD, has provided great leadership on the 1755 to 1780 band, and we look forward to moving forward on that and moving that to auction. The Guthrie-Matsui bill, which you all moved yesterday, which has been referenced, it takes the incentive auction idea and applies it to federal agencies, and that's a great step forward. And then, speaking of incentives, we have the incentive auction coming up. We have established a schedule now. We're going to have policy recommendations in January. We're going to have consideration and discussion of that until spring, when we'll be making a decision, and we'll have an auction in mid-2015. But while we're discussing spectrum and regulatory process, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up an item we will be considering today, a proposal to ask for comments on a rule to reflect the realities of new onboard aircraft technology. And there have been lots of misconceptions about that, and let me just see if I can address these right up front. One, we are proposing to continue the ban on mobile devices that can interfere with terrestrial networks. But where there is new onboard technology that eliminates that potential for interference, then there is no need for an interference rule. This is the responsible thing to do. Where the rationale for a rule doesn't exist, the rule shouldn't exist. We are the expert technical agency, and new technology removes the technical justification of this rule. In that regard, I should mention that I have spoken with Transportation Secretary Fox this morning. And he has told me that, yes, the FCC is the technical agency, and that the Department of Transportation is the aviation agency, and that they will be moving on a rule to address voice calls on airplanes. I'm the last person in the world who wants to listen to somebody talking to me while I fly across the country. But we are the technical agency, and we will make the technical rules that reflect the way the new technology works. Finally, item 3. You've all talked about the IP transitions, I should say, because it's not just one transition. It's a multifaceted process. And at today's meeting, we're going to hear a report from the Technology Transitions Policy Task Force, which will lay out a schedule, including a plan for a January order that will invite experiments in the field, real-life experiments, recommend data collection, and create a framework for policy decisions. So we have a full agenda, as you have all said. It is a privilege to be here, to be able to work with all of you, and I look forward to doing that in the time coming.
Chairman Wheeler, thank you for your public service, and thank you for recognizing our concerns on the subcommittee and full committee. And now we'll switch to, I guess once a chairman, always a chairman, right? Highest title. Former Chairwoman Clyburn, we're delighted to have you back before the committee. Thanks for your work publicly, and please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of the committee. Thank you again for allowing me to appear before you today. Since our last visit, I have had an incredible opportunity to serve as acting chair, and I'm glad to note that with the support of my colleagues and the assistance of a skilled and dedicated staff, we were able to move a number of important items which clearly advance the public interest. This hearing comes at a critical stage in our communications policy continuum. We are experiencing tremendous technological change that affects every aspect of our lives. And as we look ahead to the challenges of tomorrow, I believe it is important to understand the terrain over which we have traveled. We reached a voluntary interoperability industry solution in the lower 700 megahertz band to address an issue that for years had been impeding the deployment of valuable spectrum. We launched a proceeding to modernize the FCC's Schools and Libraries program, known as E-Rate, to ensure that our children have the resources and connectivity they need to support digital learning and become the leaders of tomorrow. We adopted an order to address rule call completion because it is unacceptable in today's world that calls to non-urban areas are not being completed. We adopted an order to reform inmate calling services to finally provide relief to millions of families who have been paying unreasonably high rates to stay connected with loved ones. We enabled the H-Block spectrum auction and the AWS-3 proposal to take major steps forward on government and commercial spectrum sharing, and we made ongoing reforms to Lifeline and proposed significant forfeitures to companies not following the FCC's rules. With Chairman Wheeler and my fellow commissioners, I look forward to building on the progress we have made. As Chairman Wheeler has made clear, the voluntary incentive auction proceeding continues to be a top commission priority. For those broadcast television licensees who want to continue to use their spectrum, the Act mandates that the Commission makes all reasonable efforts to preserve the coverage area and population served. The Act also has clear directives for the proceeds from the forward auction, which includes much-earned contributions to the Public Safety Trust Fund and the national deficit. Congress also gave the Commission authority to propose a band plan with an appropriate balance of unlicensed and licensed spectrum. Unlicensed spectrum plays a critical role in advancing more efficient use of spectrum, and commercial wireless carriers are increasingly using unlicensed Wi-Fi services to offload their smartphone traffic. In addition to spectrum, Chairman Wheeler has also announced that the Commission will consider an order next month to launch trials regarding the ongoing technology transitions. I do believe that trials, if structured properly, can produce helpful insights into how best to approach reform, and I will be keeping a keen eye on how the trials and future reforms affect all consumers. Process reform is where we have an opportunity to develop an even more efficient agency. Yesterday, the committee passed the Federal Communications Commission Process Reform Act of 2013. I am pleased that the proposed modifications to the Sunshine Act would facilitate federal commissioners' participation on the federal-state joint boards and the joint conference. I would also encourage you to review the Paperwork Reduction Act and how it can be improved. For example, the FCC is using its website to better inform consumers and industry. Yet, to obtain voluntary feedback on our website, the PRA requires OMB approval. As a result, the Commission cannot be as responsive to users without engaging in a lengthy OMB approval process. So as you can see, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee, we have both challenges and opportunities ahead. I look forward to working with each of you to address our evolving communications landscape. I appreciate your attention this morning and would be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your work, your testimony, your recommendations. And we'll now go to Commissioner Rosenworcel. Thank you for being here this morning. We're delighted to have you back, and please go ahead.
It's good to be back. Good morning, Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of the subcommittee. It is an honor to appear before you today in the company of my colleagues, new and old, at the FCC. By some measures, communications technologies account for as much as 1/6 of our economy. No wonder. These are the networks that carry all aspects of our modern commercial and civic life. They are changing at a breathtaking pace. Keeping up requires taking a fresh look at our policies. Informed by the policies of the past, we have to think boldly about the future. Now, in the weeks ahead, we will do this as we wrestle with the upcoming transition to Internet protocol and think about spectrum auctions, including incentive auctions. But I think we make a mistake if we focus only on networks themselves. After all, there is great beauty and power in what we can do with them. Our new networks can change the ways we connect, create, and conduct commerce. They can change the ways we learn and seek security. So in my brief time before you today, this is what I want to talk about: how the broadband beneath us and the airwaves all around us can improve education and improve public safety. First, I want to talk about the E-rate program. E-rate helps connect schools and libraries across the country to the Internet. It is a byproduct of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Remember 1996? Probably everyone in this room called the Internet the information superhighway. It was a long time ago. In 1996, only 14% of public schools were connected to the Internet. Today, thanks to the E-rate, that number is north of 95%, which sounds good. It sounds like the job is done. But nothing could be further from the truth, because the challenge today is not connection. It is capacity. Too many of our E-rate schools access the Internet at speeds as low as 3 megabits. That is too slow for high-definition video. It is not fast enough for the most innovative teaching tools. And it is definitely not fast enough to prepare the next generation with the STEM skills that are so essential to compete. Contrast this with efforts underway in some of our world neighbors. In South Korea, 100% of schools are connected to high-speed broadband, and all schools are converting to digital textbooks by 2016. Ireland will have all schools connected to 100 megabits next year. Finland will have all schools connected to 100 megabits the year after that. Meanwhile, in both Turkey and Thailand, the government is seeking a vendor to supply tablet computers to millions of students for a new era of broadband-enabled digital learning. Now, we can wait and see where the status quo takes us and let other nations lead the way. Or we can choose a future where all American students have the access to the broadband they need to compete, no matter who they are, where they live, or where they go to school. I think it's time to compete. I think it's time for E-rate 2.0. The FCC has a rulemaking proceeding underway to reboot and recharge the E-rate program. I think we need to make it a high priority. I think we need to find ways to bring 100 megabits to all schools in the near term and 1 gigabit to all schools in the long term. While we're at it, we must find ways to reduce the bureaucracy of this program and make it easier for small and rural schools to participate. Second, I want to talk about a number all of us know by heart, but none of us ever hopes to use. I want to talk about 911. In my time at the FCC, I have visited 911 call centers all across the country. I am always struck by the steely calm of those who answer the phones and help ensure that help is on the way. I am also struck by how many emergency calls now come in from wireless phones. In fact, nationwide, more than 70% of calls made to 911 are made from wireless phones. That is more than 400,000 calls per day. Now, if you use your wireless phone to call 911 from outdoors, your location is reported, sometimes to within 50 meters under FCC location accuracy standards. But if you use your wireless phone to call 911 from indoors, you better cross your fingers, because no FCC location accuracy standards apply. I think this is an unacceptable gap in public safety communications. It deserves your attention and ours, because no matter where you are when you call 911, you want first responders to find you. Moreover, as our networks evolve and the ways we use them change, we must make sure our public safety policies keep pace. In fact, our approaches to networks, both wired and wireless, need to evolve as markets evolve. But in our efforts, we must not lose sight of why networks matter, because they can do more than connect us. They can strengthen education and enhance our security, and of course, grow our economy in new and exciting ways. Thank you. I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Commissioner Rosenworcel, thank you for your work and your testimony and your suggestions. We'll go now to the Commissioner Pai. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work you've been doing. And please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for holding this hearing. It has been exactly 1 year since I last appeared before you, and much has happened in the time since. Most notably, we have lost 2 colleagues, and we have gained 2 new ones. Chairman Wheeler and Commissioner O'Reilly have gotten off to strong starts, and I am pleased that we are finally back at full strength. Over the past year, we have made progress in a number of different areas, but there is much more to be done. This morning, I will touch on 2 of the issues that I find most pressing: the incentive auction and E-rate reform. A fuller list of FCC priorities, from cable forbearance to AM radio, is detailed in my written testimony. First, the incentive auction. Perhaps the most daunting challenge the Commission faces is the looming spectrum crunch. To meet this challenge, we are focused on implementing the responsibilities that Congress gave us in the Spectrum Act, especially with respect to the broadcast incentive auction. The incentive auction is the Commission's best chance to push a large amount of spectrum, well suited for mobile broadband, into the commercial marketplace. I support Chairman Wheeler's recent announcement, setting the middle of 2015 as our new target. It is more important to get the incentive auction done right than it is to get it done right now. If, for example, any part of our software were to fail during the incentive auction, like another government website that shall not be named, the Commission, by law, would not get a second bite at the apple. My greatest worry about the incentive auction, however, is not with the technology. It is about participation. In order for the incentive auction to be successful, we will need robust participation by both broadcasters and wireless carriers. So the Commission must avoid choices that will deter participation in both the reverse auction and the forward auction. For the reverse auction, prices paid to broadcasters should be determined by the market, not set by administrative fiat. Any attempt to restrict payments to broadcasters, including a complicated scoring scheme, will deter broadcaster participation and risk causing the incentive auction to fail. For the forward auction, the Commission should not limit carriers' ability to participate, such as by setting a spectrum cap or narrowing the spectrum screen. This would result in less spectrum for mobile broadband, less revenue to fund national priorities that this committee has identified, and a greater chance of a failed auction. Another issue that will impact participation in the forward auction is the size of the geographic licenses to be offered. Our NPRM proposed using economic areas, but some argue that this would make it too difficult for smaller carriers to participate in the auction. Our goal should be to allow as many carriers as possible to bid, whether they be nationwide, regional, or rural. So I am pleased to see alternative proposals for license sizes, such as the newly coined partial economic areas. If technically feasible, these proposals deserve serious consideration. Aside from the incentive auction, there are many other opportunities when it comes to spectrum, from the H-block auction next month, to the possible clearing of AWS-3, to the greater unlicensed use in the 5 gigahertz band. Consistent with my all-of-the-above approach, I hope we seize all of these opportunities in the near term. The second issue I will discuss is the Universal Service Fund's Schools and Libraries program, better known as E-rate. In many ways, E-rate has been a success, as my colleague has pointed out. But it also has had difficulties. The funding process can stretch for years. Many schools and libraries feel compelled to hire outside consultants to handle all the complexities. Others don't bother applying at all. Services like paging are prioritized over services like connecting classrooms. And there's no meaningful transparency into either the amount or the impact of E-rate spending. To solve these problems, I proposed a student-centered E-rate program. This means an upfront allocation of funding and a matching requirement, so that applicants know how much money they can spend and have greater incentives to spend that money wisely. This means simplifying the application process. This means targeting funding at next-generation technologies while still letting local schools set their own priorities. And this means making all funding and spending decisions accessible on a central website that everyone can see. In its first year, a student-centered approach would provide an extra $1 billion for next-generation services, all without collecting an extra dime from the American people. Accordingly, I believe it would be premature to increase the program's budget. And under no circumstances should we do so without finding corresponding savings in other parts of the Universal Service Fund. We cannot ask Americans to pay even more in their monthly phone bills, especially when median household income in this country is now lower than it was in 2007. Thank you once again to Chairman Walden and Ranking Member Eshoo for holding this hearing. I look forward to answering your questions and to continuing to work with you and my colleagues in the months to come.
Thank you, Commissioner Pai. We appreciate your thoughtful testimony and your recommendations. We'll now go to Commissioner O'Reilly. Welcome aboard the Federal Communications Commission. Welcome back before this committee. And you know how the rules work, so please go ahead. And again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you to the Chairman and Ranking Member and the members of the subcommittee. In respect of the time of the subcommittee members, I'd like to make 5 points and then move on to answer your questions. Point 1, I'm truly honored to be before the subcommittee. I had the pleasure of working on the full committee staff for 8 years, and it was one of the greatest jobs I will ever have. The breadth of knowledge and command of the diverse policy issues by the members of this committee are of the highest quality. Point 2, the FCC is an independent agency, not part of the executive branch. It was created by Congress and serves to implement the statutes enacted by Congress. I firmly believe that our role is to follow the statute as written and not substitute our thoughts for your work. The Commission has no right or authority to ignore the statute or statutory deadlines. Thankfully, I've worked on most communication policy statutes over the last 20 years and have firsthand knowledge of the intent behind many key provisions. Point 3, the Commission has difficult but exciting work ahead. If done correctly, it can have a significant positive impact on U.S. domestic product and on national productivity. Our communications companies are extremely important to the U.S. economy, and we must allow them to flourish in the world marketplace. The Commission's overall focus, however, must remain on the consumer. Point 4, in terms of specific items, my particular focus and attention will be on the immediate work before the Commission. In the big picture, the FCC must finish rules for the incentive auctions, continue USF reform, proceed with the IP transition trials, and complete our media ownership proceeding. Point 5, part of the role of an FCC commissioner is to conduct outreach and provide information to the public. I take this function seriously, and it's why I'm choosing to spend some time on the issue of distracted driving caused by wireless device users. Drivers need to put away their wireless phones and focus their eyes on the drive. Let me be clear. My view is the wireless industry is doing yeoman's work to get out the message. They are aware of the problem, they are dedicating considerable resources to finding solutions and education, and they're working hard to prevent the horrible tragedies caused by texting, viewing, emailing, tweeting, mapping, posting, among others, while driving. It does not appear that more government regulation will be helpful in this space. Instead, I am talking to my other colleagues to find ways to use our voice in non-regulatory, non-costly ways to educate the public and prevent senseless accidents. Thank you.
You win the prize. 2 minutes and 37 seconds returned. We want to thank you all.
Familiar with this committee very well.
That's right. Yes, indeed. Some will learn along the way. We appreciate all your testimony and your recommendations, and it's just good to have all 5 commissioners in place, or 4 commissioners and chair in place. As Commissioner Pai said, it has been a year to the day, I think, since we had the commissioners here. So welcome aboard. I know we all have a lot of questions. I'm going to. I learned at the heels of the former chairman, Mr. Dingell, about trying to get answers at a relatively rapid rate. So I'm going to try and post some of these not as skillfully as he does in a yes or no format, but the extent to which you can address them rapidly, that would be good. And I want to start, Mr. Wheeler, with you as chairman. I know you all are voting on this NPRM today. I do want to stress it would be helpful if public got to see that. As far as I know, you and your staff's the only one who see it in advance. That's one of the process issues I hope you'll break through, and this maybe will be the last NPRM that's not public first. But the Commission's, I want to follow up and figure out how you're going to permit, as your testimony indicates, airlines to choose whether to allow voice calls. And here's why I ask it. Is the Commission planning to waive either the common carrier obligation to complete calls or the net neutrality rules on blocking VoIP packets? Both would seem to be necessary in order to prevent voice calling from aircraft.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, to your point, that the NPRM that we are considering today will be complete in listing the rule, the words of the rule that we are considering, in light with the philosophy that you and I share, which is let's get it out there so people can see it. The purpose of this is to do just that, to put the language out so people can see it and give us their comments on it. Now, to your specific question, the Open Internet Order specifically provides what's called a premises exemption. And that means that coffee shops, bookstores, and airlines mentioned by name are exempted from the order, and that under the definition of reasonable network management, which is one of the tools that are allowed for premises owners, which include airlines, there is the ability to pick and choose exactly what comes over.
All right. We'll follow up more on the other piece that you might have to deal with as well. I want to ask you about Title II. You haven't, but there's been a proceeding open at the Commission for a long time that would, the reclassification docket. Are you planning to keep that open, or are you planning to close it?
So I think we're in a situation right now where we're waiting for a court opinion on exactly what our authorities are on a broad sense. And that there is no rush between now and then to make a decision on Title II. I will note, however, that as you mentioned, this docket has been open for a long time, and it has not had the threatened chilling effect that some have worried about on investment in wireless and broadband infrastructure. This is an issue that clearly is going to have to be dealt with, and we'll start with the court decision.
So I got about 3 more questions I want to try and get in here. We understand the FCC has launched a study on multi-market study of critical information needs. Apparently this study includes a qualitative media analysis, which would require interviewing reporters and editors to figure out how the media decide what news stories to run. Are these the kinds of questions a government entity should be asking of the news media? And with somebody with a journalism degree, I do get a little chill up my spine thinking about the government asking how these decisions are made. Doesn't it have an effect on the media that the regulatory body is even asking these questions? And how does it help you fulfill your Section 257 mandate upon which it's predicated?
So I think this goes back to the root of the discussion you and I were having a moment ago about making sure that the public understands what's going on. The 257 requirement mandates lowering barriers to access to media for minorities, women, small business, and other identified groups. In order to make that kind of a judgment, you have to have facts. In order to have facts, you do studies. And what we did was there is a study that has been proposed by a consulting firm that we were working with, and we put that out for public notice to exactly get the kind of input that you're suggesting. But it's not, and this is not an effort to influence the media.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you just a second, because when you're spending somewhere between 209,000 and 918, and some of the questions of the media personnel include what's the news philosophy of the station, who decides what stories are covered, what are the demographics of news management staff, have you ever suggested coverage, what you consider to be a story with critical information for consumers' views, what was the reason given for the decision. These seem like really internal journalistic issues. Now, I need to move on to one other because I'm actually over, but it's a very important question. The quantile regression analysis, QRA, approach to providing universal support for rural companies that was part of the Commission's USF reform efforts has had a negative impact on investment and the deployment of broadband services in rural America. Commissioner Pai, you've been an advocate for the need to address this problem to ensure that rural Americans are not left behind. What do you recommend, Commissioner Pai, needs to be done with regard to the application of the QRA?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I've seen the problems on paper. The Obama administration's Department of Agriculture, for example, reported to us earlier this year that some 37% of funds from RUS are sitting on the table because there's so much uncertainty among rural carriers. And I've seen it in person from my home state of Kansas to carriers in rural Alaska. Because they are uncertain about what the future portends because of the QRA, they are not making additional investments in terms of broadband, and that creates a digital divide that we won't be able to bridge.
So, Chairman Wheeler, if I might, given the negative impact of the QRA it's having on broadband development, especially in rural America, do you intend to reconsider its application?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have asked the Bureau to draft and let me see what an order that I could share with my colleagues would be to eliminate the QRA and to return to the high-cost loop support model.
I appreciate that. I've got other issues, obviously, with the FM translators for AM and delay in the rulemaking, dealing with cable operators and the groups utilized by them. And so maybe we can follow up afterwards, but the committee's been kind to let me overextend my questioning, but we're usually fairly flexible on that here. So now I'll turn it over to the ranking member from California, Ms. Eshoo.
That's great. So I have 7 minutes, right, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, you said that it's your 39th day. What I'd like to add to that is that I think your adult lifetime of work has brought you to this. So it's not just really
That's
your 39th day.
been a long lifetime at this point.
It's a wonderful path that has prepared you for this position. I have a whole list of niche issues, which is really the way we deal with all of these things. First of all, do you think you're going to get a deal on cell phone unlocking by the end of this year?
I hope that we will be presenting to the Commission today. As a matter of fact, I know that we will be presenting to the Commission today the voluntary agreement that has been reached with the wireless industry, and so the answer to your question is strongly yes.
That's just terrific. My second question to you, Mr. Chairman, is last week, as you know, I joined with my colleagues, Representatives Doyle and Matsui, to ask you to take action to prevent AT&T from implementing a significant rate hike for their special access customers. I appreciate what you have done in terms of the suspension, but I think that there's much more that needs to be done on special access reform. Can we expect further action on special access reform?
I apologize, Ms. Eshoo, but I am currently recused from that proceeding, and so
I see. So how will it happen?
It moves ahead with the other members of the Commission.
I see. Well, I'm just going to assume that they're going to that this area is going to be examined because we really have to have a reasonable rates for this important service. Commissioner Rosenworcel, thank you for your testimony. I love the way you present things. It's so clear. You can feel the sense of urgency and why it's urgent. How are you going to pursue getting this done at the Commission? The whole issue of E-rate, everything that's attached to it. You've presented an eloquent case, and I think that you gave a fantastic speech last week on 911 and the problems that we have between indoor and outdoor. So on both that and the E-rate, maybe I should be asking the chairman what he plans to do on E-rate. I know what you want to do, but maybe we should just switch over to Chairman Wheeler.
Well, I think on E-rate that there is a leader in this commission, and that Commissioner.
Well, we need 5.
Huh?
We need 5.
But as you all say, I would like to associate myself with the remarks of
Good,
Commissioner
good.
Rosenworcel.
Well, we'll look forward to you joining her in that effort, and maybe the next time the commission comes before us, you can tell us the steps that you're going to take. On the,
If I can do one thing, we are going to put out a schedule, just like we have for the incentive auction and the IP transition, to address this issue.
That's terrific. On the challenge of the indoor versus outdoor and wireless and 911, what's your plan to address this?
Well, as the old saying goes, you may only make one 911 call in your life, but it will be the most important call you ever make. And right now, if you make that call from your wireline phone, your first responder knows exactly where you are.
Right.
If you make that call outdoors in a field using your wireless phone, we have location accuracy standards so that first responder.
So I'm asking what you want to do about where the challenge lies.
So
we know what's working.
Indoors is the problem. We have no standards, and increasingly, households are cutting the cord. More than 1/3 of households rely exclusively on their wireless phones. So I don't think it's acceptable that when people make emergency calls, first responders can't find them. I've recommended in that speech that you mentioned that we start a rulemaking to address this, because we've heard both from carriers and from public safety officials on the front line that this is an issue that needs
good for you for identifying this and taking it up, because I think one of the things that I taught my children from their earliest memory was 911 and putting their little fingers on the keypad so that they would understand that. And I think you're absolutely right. On Commissioner Pai, you made a wonderful comment, something about not one dime more on phone bills. I want to raise something with the chairman, going back to it, about below the line fees. Representatives Doyle, Lujan, Matheson, myself, we wrote to our nation's leading wireless and wireline providers, and we asked them about their practice of applying below the line fees on monthly bills. I agree with Commissioner Pai. That's why we wrote. We have a concern about what people are paying. These things are hidden. They think that they think everything on their bill is a tax. And I have to tell you, I brought my bills in. I couldn't tell what the heck they were, who was doing what to whom, and what it was for. So tell me what you think the agency, or if you have, I know there's a long list of big challenges, but these are still important issues for consumers. What steps can the agency take under existing statute to ensure that consumers know exactly how much they're paying each month, especially prior to signing up for their service, and this whole issue of below-the-line fees?
Yeah, Ms. Eshoo, this is a very legitimate concern. The specific one I believe you're referencing is a retransmission consent fee charge that cable operators have just begun putting on the bill.
Right.
And I say just begun. And I'm trying to get our arms around that and figure out just exactly what our authorities are to answer your question. It does, however, strike me that it fits right in the broader issue that the chairman and Mr. Upton and others have talked about in terms of the kinds of issues that need to be addressed in a Telecom Act rewrite here. It's just what is going on. If
but that'll be like 7 years from now.
Well, no, but I.
Oh, no.
Oh, well,
well, I won't speak.
Let's see.
I won't get crosswise between you and the chairman.
No. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Walden. And thank you to the entire commission. I want to say also a welcome to the whole new team that has come in. And we wish you well. We really do. And the chairman and the commission will operate at a higher level because of the high level of people that have come in to support the work. So congratulations to each one of you.
We'll now move on to the vice chair of the subcommittee, Mr. Latta from Ohio, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks very much for our commission members for being with us today. And this is a question I'd like to ask all of you. And this question is, the incentive auction legislation prohibits the FCC from excluding qualified bidders from the auction. Unfortunately, while the incentive auction process works its way up to the Commission, it appears that the Wireless Bureau is simultaneously working on the spectrum aggregation docket to achieve de facto spectrum caps. Will you commit to allowing any interested bidder that complies with the statutory requirements to participate fully in the auction? And Chairman, if I could start with you, because I noticed in your testimony on page 6 that when you talked about the incentive auction, you said that you're looking at a voluntary market-oriented approach. So if I could start with you.
The statute is quite explicit in that regard, that the Commission may not exclude somebody from participating.
And also on just aggregating, so it'd be wide open for everyone to be involved in that.
Well, it's interesting what's been developing here. I mean, the CEO of AT&T recently came out with a statement saying, wait a minute, I think I would like to have rules to make sure that not one party can run away with all the spectrum. So I think there's in between those positions is where reality exists. But the statute, I agree, is quite clear. The statute says that you will not exclude anybody, and the statute also says that the Commission will design an auction so as to promote economic opportunity and competition and consumer choice to sustain a healthy wireless marketplace. And we'll do both.
Madam Clyburn.
Yes, Section 6404 is clear that any party that abides or obeys the rules, that they are qualified to participate. It also makes clear that the Commission has the authority to enforce and introduce general rules of general applicability that will allow for spectrum aggregation in order to promote competition. So again, my colleague mentioned that part of the reason for, I think, for some of the robust participation in the type of ideas that we're seeing is because we took a dual path. On the same day we released the rules, or released the notice of proposed rulemaking on incentive auction, we also released a notice of proposed rulemakings on trying to glean information about this dual path. So I think that this, in the long run, will help and improve our information and information dissemination and acquisition and rulemaking once we decide on a clear path forward.
Thank you. Commissioner?
The Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act says that we can have rules of general applicability, but we cannot exclude anyone from participation in the auction. I think it's easy and simple. We just have to follow the law.
Commissioner Pai?
I would agree with my colleague, and I would also point out that if you look at the end goal, which is to have a successful auction that pushes out a lot of spectrum, that yields sufficient revenue to fund national priorities, and that provides fairness to all parties involved, then we should not preclusively deter participation from wireless carriers by adopting unduly strict spectrum policies.
Commissioner O'Reilly?
I want to thank my colleagues for stating that the statute is clear, because as many people who worked on it, it was an effort to give the Commission some authority in this space when members couldn't come to agreement. I'm extremely hesitant to impose limitations on spectrum aggregation, because we have certain obligations under the statute otherwise. In a nice way, I mean this, the money's already been spent. We have already spent the money from the Spectrum Act, and so we have obligations to provide $7 billion for FirstNet, and we have deficit reduction numbers that have already gone out the door. So I'm worried about anything that would depress auction revenues. I'm certainly aware of the statute, and I want to remain open to considering, but I'm hesitant at this time to impose any type of limitation.
Thank you. And many of you know that rural call completion has been an ongoing issue in my district, and I commend the FCC for producing the November 8th order and further notice of proposed rulemaking to improve the Commission's ability to monitor the delivery of calls to rural areas by mandating certain recording, retention, and reporting requirements from carriers. And Commissioner Pai, do you believe the November 8th order will resolve the call completion problem, or does more need to be done?
Congressman, I certainly hope that it will. Whether it's in Toledo or Topeka, we need to figure out where the kink in the system is, whether it is intermediate providers, whether it's last mile, what point in the network is failing. And then if it's a technical problem, then we can take steps to fix that technical problem. But if it is something else, then the FCC needs to be empowered to take corrective action. So I certainly support taking the appropriate action sooner rather than later on that issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I see my time's expired, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now turn to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to indicate that under the Act, the FCC may not single out a specific provider for exclusion from a system of competitive bidding. At the same time, the FCC is permitted to adopt and enforce rules of general applicability that promote competition. Even AT&T recently acknowledged they would support rules that limit the amount of spectrum any one company could acquire as long as the rules applied evenly to all auction participants. Chairman Wheeler, as you know, I'm a strong supporter of the FCC's open Internet rules because I believe the Internet must remain an open platform for innovation and commerce. You've emphasized the importance of the open Internet order. At the same time, you recently made comments suggesting that an Internet service provider could charge a content provider, such as Netflix, a fee in order to guarantee the best available transmission speed. Do you see these type of business arrangements as consistent with the FCC's open Internet rules that you support?
Thank you, Mr. Waxman, for raising that issue, because it gives me an opportunity to get more specific than I was in Ohio. I am a strong supporter of the open Internet rules, full stop. The rules were written in such a way as to envision opportunities for innovation and experimentation, and to impose on them a balance between protecting the open Internet, protecting consumers, and stimulating innovation. New ideas under the open Internet order, new ideas such as those you've referenced, in a wireless environment particularly, are not prohibited. But there is a clear responsibility for the Commission to make sure that what takes place does not interfere with Internet access, is not anti-competitive, and does not provide preferential treatment. And we will enforce that. We will maintain the balance between innovation and assuring that there's an open Internet.
I appreciate your expanding on that issue. Well, network infrastructure and technology have changed since the passage of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. The values embedded in the Act have not. And, Mr. Chairman, I know the Commission will soon begin a process to collect real-world information and data on the IP transitions. How will the Commission continue to advance the long-standing goals of competition, universal access, and consumer protection throughout this transition process?
You know, Mr. Waxman, there are many people who have described the trials, the IP trials, as a technology trial. I don't think they're a technology trial. We know how to build IP networks. They are exactly what you just raised. They are a values trial. They are, how do we make sure that the values that for 100 years Americans have come to expect from their networks continue even after the way in which that network operates changes. And that's what we're going to be looking for in these trials. It's not whether the gazintas and the gazautas work. We know that that can get taken care of. It is, what are the values? How do you preserve the values in the new technological environment?
Commissioner Rosenworcel, do you want to add anything to that?
I think there are so many exciting things that can come with new networks. And I think we should embrace the future rather than reject it. So I think experimenting in these kind of trials is a smart way to go. But as we move into the future, what we do has to be informed by the values that have always been a part of communications policy. And I see 4: public safety, universal access, competition, and consumer protection.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate your appeal to bipartisanship in your testimony, and I know you played an important role in helping us get bipartisan legislation in the passage of the Public Safety and Spectrum Act last year, because you helped negotiate the provisions in the availability of unlicensed spectrum in the broadcast incentive auction. What's your perspective on unlicensed spectrum generally, and do you think the Commission is on the right track in balancing the availability of unlicensed and licensed bands?
Yes, I'm a strong proponent of unlicensed spectrum. I'm always amazed at what the innovators and the experimenters can do with unlicensed spectrum. I think there's great opportunity in the 600 megahertz for more unlicensed spectrum. The NPRM that was put out in this situation proposed a number of different ideas where unlicensed could fit. They proposed channels 37, the guard bands, if there are going to be guard bands, depending on what our band plan looks like. We talked about wireless microphones. There's going to be still white space, at least in the 500, maybe in the 600 as well. And then there's going to be residual conversions, depending if you're talking about converting from 6 megahertz broadcast channels to 5 megahertz wireless channels. So there should be opportunities in the incentive auctions after our rules are complete for unlicensed spectrum, and I'm strongly supportive of those. The only difficulty is figuring out how big those guard bands should be.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is to Commissioner Pai. You stated in your testimony that 92% of Americans now can choose from 10 or more wireline competitors. If that number is accurate, doesn't it demonstrate that the pro-competitive policies of the 96 Telecom Act are working? And don't you believe we should continue to support a marketplace that gives non-incumbents a fair chance to compete?
Congressman Waxman, thank you for the question. I think what the multiplicity of choices that consumers enjoy today demonstrates is that in an IP environment where you have what convergence, something that we only dreamed about during the 96 Act, where you have telephone companies competing with cable companies, competing with wireless companies and others to provide the same services, that we can now rely in a way we could not in 1996 on the marketplace and technological innovation to drive consumer choice. And so to the extent that there are values of competition embedded in the 1996 Act, I of course embrace those. But I think we also need to be mindful of the fact that technology can quite often outpace where laws and regulations are, and that appears to be where we are with respect to the IP transition.
Yeah, but do you think we should support a marketplace that gives non-incumbents a fair chance to compete?
Oh, absolutely. I think the marketplace should give every competitor a fair chance to compete.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now turn to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you very much. And as the representative of Michigan State University, I want to say thank you for giving me a great weekend. I appreciate that very much. I do find it suspicious, however, that my phone has not worked since the game. I wonder if you might be looking into that for me, Mr. Chairman. The FCC's recent Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council meeting, I understand you talked about the need to apply metrics and evaluate cybersecurity. Can you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, the CISRIC, which is the shorthand for the group you're talking about, has done a terrific job in using the multi-stakeholder process to come up with rules on botnets, on DNSSEC, on router security, important kinds of network security issues. But it's not enough just to say, okay, here are the rules and then walk away. The question is, are the rules working? And so what I've asked CISRIC to do, not for us to impose, but in the multi-stakeholder process, is to say, how do you establish metrics to know if this is working? Because that's this is the trust but verify kind of a situation.
Well, how do you find those metrics? How are you working through that process to define metrics in threats that change literally by the hour?
But so on those three issues, for instance, on botnets, for instance, how can you track the movement of where botnets are going? They seem to have moved into data centers, for instance, and what do we know about that, and what might that suggest? and what are we seeing in terms of results of the implementation of the kinds of things that CISRIC has suggested. That's what we need to know.
So, and if you find that out and you find that you are in some disagreement with industry on those, meeting those standards, do you foresee a regulatory scheme?
Well, I wouldn't want to presume a hypothetical. I would hope that we would be working with industry to identify what needs to be done. And much like we are going to announce today on cell phone unlocking, when we sat with industry and said, here's a problem, it's got to be solved. And by the way, we'll have metrics on that. I think that's the preferable first approach, and that's the approach that we're taking with CISRIC.
But when you say that, does that mean, if I hear you correctly, that means you're at least contemplating a regulatory scheme of some sort beyond just the voluntary, here's our metrics, try to meet
that's the right question, but it's not, the key word is contemplating. I've talked repeatedly about what I call the seesaw, the regulatory seesaw. You do this, we don't need to do this. And so what CISRIC is doing is saying, okay, here are the kinds of things that need to be done. I said, let's measure, let's sure that's going, because the result is that we don't. If the seesaw has to tip, it has to tip, but it only tips on the basis of need, not the basis of theory.
If I understood your answer right, there's a possibility you could regulate.
There's always a possibility, sure.
Okay, we should have lots of conversations on that. I worry that by the time you process your regulatory framework, you're too late. You've missed the boat. The threat changes. They've moved down the path.
I could not agree more. That the challenge of networks and the reason why the multi-stakeholder process is preferred is because it is much more dynamic, much more flexible, moves much quicker than a regulatory process can, and then can stay flexible. Okay. And that's why I'm trying to say, yes, this is the preferred process to deal with.
So you're not going to move away from the council?
I'm sorry?
You're not going to move away from the council model for regulation. You're going to continue to try
the multi-stakeholder process on this is the right way to go.
Perfect. Can you talk about Team Telecom? It's an important complement to the CFIUS process.
Right.
In terms of preventing investments or IT equipment purchases to prevent certainly a threat to our national security interests, like Chinese attempts to gain control of IT and telecommunication nodes in the United States. Can you walk us through where you're at on that and give us some idea what you're thinking?
Well, when issues come before the commission relative to mergers, acquisitions, whatever the case may be, the input from Team Telecom is always sought and taken into account, and is crucially important.
Yeah. Do you see an improvement to that process? Can we do something different? You have a limited set of, once that report comes back, you have a limited set of decisions you can make. You're either in, you're out,
correct,
or you disagree with the decision. Is there something better we should be doing there, providing some authority for you all to be given, again, the nature of the changing technology and how fast it changes?
I have not had to live through one of these yet, so I'm probably not qualified to opine here on the fly. I'd love to look into this and to have a discussion with you about it.
Super. We're looking at some reforms to CFIUS to try to make sure we're keeping up, and I look forward to that dialogue. To all the folks, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're now turned to Committee Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Dingell, for also from Michigan, I believe, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Dingell.
Mr. Chairman, I commend you for this very important hearing, and I have no comments on football or other matters. I want to welcome my old friend, Chairman Wheeler, to the committee. We look forward to great things from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm satisfied you will serve with distinction. I want to also welcome Commissioner O'Reilly, and I want to commend Commissioner Clyburn for her fine service as acting chairwoman. Quite frankly, her daddy would be very proud. My questions this morning are going to be directed solely at Chairman Wheeler, and will elicit, as you will not be surprised to hear, yes or no responses. Chairman Wheeler, I'd like to start with the reverse auction of broadcast frequencies authorized by the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act. I note you recently announced that the Commission will not conduct such auction until 2015. That gives you an extra year. In the meantime, do you expect to complete negotiations concerning the relocation of broadcast frequencies with Canada, Mexico, and our border areas? Yes or no?
No, but am very hopeful that we will be able to move it forward. And as DTV showed, you don't have to have the signature on the page.
And you know that can cause an awful lot of viewers to lose service and an awful lot of screens to go dark in our part of the country. Chairman Wheeler, similarly, paragraph 50 of the Commission's notice of proposed rulemaking for the incentive auction states, quote, the Commission expects interested parties will have an opportunity for meaningful comment on all specific repackaging methodologies it is considering before it makes a decision. Does the Commission publicly commit to sharing with the public the broadcast frequency repacking methodology it adopts, as well as the variables and other inputs it may use to predict repackaging results? Yes or no?
I'll go beyond yes and say absolutely.
Now, Mr. Chairman, let's move on to the forward auction of broadcast frequencies. Section 6403C of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act provides the Commission may not grant licenses through forward auction, reassign or reallocate broadcast frequencies, or revoke spectrum usage right unless the proceeds of the forward auction are greater than the following three factors combined. First, the total amount of compensation the Commission must pay successful bidders in the reverse auction, the costs of conducting a forward auction, and the estimated costs for the Commission to pay for broadcaster reallocations. In addition, it is in the public interest that the Commission ensure the auction raises a significant amount of money in order to help build out of the first net. Together, these constitute a significant pressure on the Commission to raise sufficient revenues to accomplish these objectives. Do they not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Chairman, at the end, will the Commission adopt transparent and simple rules to encourage participation by the broadest group of wireless providers in the forward auction? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, let's focus our attention on intelligent transportation systems. This is of considerable importance to my part of the country and our principal industries, and the 5 gigahertz band. Given that the Commission licensed ITS almost 15 years ago, is it reasonable to say that it would be premature for the Commission to authorize unlicensed use of the 5850-5925 megahertz band before the studies are completed that confirm such use would not cause harmful interference with ITS services and other incumbent users? Yes or no?
Yes, and let me go further. We will not authorize if there's harmful interference.
I am very comforted that you are here this morning, Mr. Chairman. Now, Chairman Wheeler, do you believe that the Commission should approve unlicensed use of the 5850-5925 megahertz band before definitively establishing no risk of harmful interference with ITS systems or practical strategies to mitigate such risk? Yes.
No, and I repeat, we'll do nothing that causes harmful interference.
Now, Mr. Chairman, alternately, is the Commission considering moving forward with rulemaking opening up only the 5350 megahertz band for unlicensed use? Yes or no?
So this is where I need to just ask a question, sir. The answer is yes if it is, are we considering? The answer is no if we have decided.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to commend you for your work in advancing the transition to IP-based networks. Will the Commission consider an order in January 2014 that will address geographic trials as well as how to protect in the best way consumers using IP-based networks. Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have been most gracious to me, and I thank you for this. Mr. Chairman, your comments have been most enlightening and helpful. I want to thank you and the members of the Commission for your presence and assistance to us this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes for 5 minutes Mr. Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Chairman Wheeler, and welcome to the FCC also, Mr. O'Reilly. Appreciate having you here. And Commissioner Clyburn, again, I echo the good work that you did in your time as chairwoman. But there seems to be a lot of progress being made. This is to Chairman Wheeler. A lot of progress being made to free up the 1755 to 1780 hertz band for commercial use, megahertz band. And I know the FCC has already sought comment on how this band should be used for commercial purposes. Is the FCC on track to auction the 1755 to 1780 band paired with the 2155, 2180 band? And if so, when will it occur?
So the answer is yes, we are on track. There are some issues that still have to be worked out with NTI and DOD and some.
Are there some impediments?
But I think, I'm sorry, what?
Are there some impediments that you can identify that you're on track, but you say there are some impediments?
I think these are just implementational kinds of things in their agreement. But to be specific to your question, I would hope that we could do it in the September timeframe.
September timeframe, great. And then you spent some time in the wireless industry, I know, and have seen firsthand how spectrum demand has grown exponentially. I realize that a lot of our short-term focus is on the incentive auction on the 1755 to 1780 megahertz. But looking forward, what is the FCC doing to plan for future spectrum demand, and how can the FCC ensure that there continues to be a pipeline of new spectrum to satisfy what consumers want, insatiable demand for bandwidth anywhere, anytime? So just looking again, how do you plan for future spectrum demand beyond this? What kind of thoughts do you have beyond this?
Sure. Well, first we say yay and verily to what you and Ms. Matsui have done. Applying the incentive auction concepts to government spectrum. I'm a believer that by the time that you peel everything away, it comes down to economics, no matter who you are, right? And the economics of an agency where they can get cash to help them fulfill their mission is an important kind of decision they should make. And you've created, with Ms. Matsui, have created a structure where this can happen.
Well, we looked at that in our working group, and it's a lot of work for these agencies to do that. It's not something you can just wish away. As I learn more and more about it, and I always say that I didn't run around Kentucky saying, "Send me to Washington and I'll deliver you spectrum." And so you learn things when you get elected that you never thought you would deal with. That I found this fascinating because, as I said, my constituents demand it. They want fast bandwidth. So,
but it's also interesting.
But it is true that we have to. So we were looking at it just by law, by fiat, say you have to release spectrum. I mean, you could get numbers. Well, it's going to cost this. It's going to cost that, and so it does give them a reason to go in and make this happen.
And the interesting thing is, so I was involved in the negotiation for AWS 1 back in the year 2000, and the first negotiation with the Department of Defense. And we kept saying to them, but you're going to get money. And they kept saying, but we can't spend it because it goes to the General Treasury.
Right.
And so what you have done is set up a structure to help compensate people. And the beauty of it is that what it does is that it creates a cash flow for them to be able to meet their new needs and to be able to upgrade their equipment, and so it's a winning situation all around.
I think, Ms. Matsushi, I think yesterday you said win-win-win. I think it does for the consumers, for the agencies, and for the taxpayers. So So in the future, what are you kind of looking at? You think should happen for bandwidth and more spectrum as we move into the future?
I'm sorry.
I mean, just as we move on into beyond the immediate auctions and things. What are other things you think we can do to free spectrum?
Well, I think we have, I mean, so first of all, we're constantly looking at how do you get the most efficient use out of the spectrum. One of the interesting things that we're going to be running a test on is what do you do with spectrum sharing? Because there's probably there is in a digital world the opportunity to share spectrum, but our spectrum allocations were set up with analog assumptions. Mm-hmm. And so if we can share it, reuse it, it's a great opportunity, and we need to be pursuing that as well.
Yeah, great metaphor that I always thought was you don't have a lane on a highway dedicated just for emergency vehicles, but when the emergency vehicles come down the highway, people get out of the way. And I think that's a great metaphor for that. Point. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back 15 seconds.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just follow up on my partner's questions here. I know back in the day you were looking at the use of federal spectrum. And I think it's a concept now that has finally come to the point where we can actually do something about it. And I believe that this is a way to really encourage the federal agencies to relinquish the non-critical spectrum. And as Congressman Guthrie says, it's not easy to do, but we worked with DOD and we made a lot of progress. Now, I am also looking at what Commissioner Rosenworcel has also always said about using the carrot and stick approach regarding the federal spectrum holders and having them relinquish their spectrum. Now, in your view, and I also want Chairman Wheeler to comment on this too, are the financial incentives identified in the bill adequate to encourage federal agencies to relinquish non-critical spectrum? And I think I'll go for you first, Chairman Wheeler.
I don't know the answer to that because I haven't market tested it, you know. And I think that is this enough incentive is a market test question. So I'm going to, with all due respect, punt. What's important is the concept that has been developed, and it would seem to me that once that concept is codified, that then making sure that incentives are adequate is frankly the easier lift on the whole exercise.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel?
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, that the legislation that you and Congressman Guthrie have introduced is terrific. The demand on our airwaves is going up and the supply of unencumbered spectrum is going down. It's time to be creative. This legislation is creative. As far as the incentives go, I think it's a good starting point for conversation. Because right now, federal agencies, by some measures, have veto control over about 60% of our airwaves. They use their spectrum, their mission focus, to protect our national defense, to keep our planes in the sky, to tell us what weather patterns are coming. But they don't have structural incentives to be efficient with it. Your bill is a start of a conversation about how we should apply those incentives, and if we get them right, we will have a catalyst for a lot more spectrum from new mobile broadband uses, which would be a terrific thing for the economy.
Great. Thank you very much. Chairman Wheeler, you've emphasized how important it is for you to lead the FCC in fact-based decision-making. In the 5 gigahertz proceeding, for example, this committee is looking to the FCC's engineering expertise to determine the conditions under which Wi-Fi can use the band in a way that protects the missions of federal systems and commercial systems. How are you and your staff planning on responding to the challenge, and is this proceeding a priority for the Commission?
So as Commissioner O'Reilly said, I would associate myself with his comment that he's a strong supporter of unlicensed. The key, of course, is need to make sure that there's no harmful interference, as I discussed with Mr. Dingell. But I believe that if you take a look at the 5 gigahertz and you look at Block 1, NII 1, that we should be moving to rulemaking on that, which is something that Commissioner Pai has often suggested. that when you look at Band 2, which is DOD, and Band 4, which is ITS, that we have to address the questions that I was addressing with Mr. Dingle, and that is to make sure there is no harmful interference, and there's nothing in the record that really gets to that at this point in time. But we need to build that record.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. And I have to ask a broadband adoption question here. The FCC has, Chairman Wheeler, implemented broadband adoption pilots as part of the Lifeline reform measures. Can you explain what the FCC plans to do here, and what is the goal of these pilot projects?
So there are 14 projects that are taking place around the country that we're funding with some of the savings that we've had in other parts of the program. And we're going to be looking at, for instance, what is the impact of a Lifeline-like subsidy on broadband adoption? And we're going to be looking at what are the kinds of training issues to help people understand what broadband can do for them and the kinds of things that they can do once they get on the internet. Because those seem to go part and parcel. It's not just that you can access it, but also that you can use it and you understand why you ought to be using it.
So are you going to use this information to develop a responsible permanent broadband adoption program?
That's the goal. We're developing. These are trials to inform our future actions, and broadband, wireless broadband, and broadband adoption are kind of the sine qua non of what the agency does.
Well, thank you. I yield back my time.
The gentlelady yields back her time, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to make a comment on the audience. This one's a lot bigger than the one upstairs with the joint hearing, and they seem to be more interested too. So I guess that's a credit to this subcommittee and the FCC commissioners. We have the NRCC commission, not NRC, NRC.
Think you need to be clear on that one. But.
That would be news, wouldn't it? If Greg Walden was testifying upstairs. Anyway, I just have one question. The Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act requires repackaging and auctioning of the 65 megahertz of spectrum, and the low-power TV stations, of which there are hundreds, if not thousands, are not guaranteed continued existence. But Chairman Waldron of this subcommittee and myself have a bill that we hope to introduce very soon. While it doesn't guarantee them any additional rights, it does create, I hope, a pathway so that they may continue to exist. As the new chairman of the commission, Mr. Wheeler, do you have any thoughts on what might be done to give our low-power TV industry a chance to continue to exist?
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Yes, and they probably fall in three buckets. One, there's been a lot of talk about following the statute, and as you point out, the statute says that LPTV and translators are secondary services, and that's what the statute says. Second is we have actually opened a public notice on the delivery of the content of LPTVs. How do we make sure that the content, and this ends up being more of a digital technology question than anything else, and how do you use digital technology to get the content out? Because that's the consumer protection issue here, to make sure the consumer gets the content. And then the third point here is that there may be a safeguard in the reality that rural areas don't have that great a demand for spectrum for wireless services to begin with, and so they may be operating in areas where there will be less pressure to get spectrum. But we will find out as we go through this process.
Mr. Commissioner O'Reilly, you're the new kid on the block, so to speak. you haven't had a chance publicly to comment on this issue. Do you have any thoughts about low-power TV and what might be done to help them continue to exist?
Well, the chairman's right in the sense, and you are right to introduce legislation. And working for the members on the Spectrum Act, there was a decision made by the members to not protect low power and translators. And you have legislation. I would defer to your legislation to whether they may resolve that. I know you and I had a chance to talk. I know some of the low power representatives have argued it may be beneficial financially to the government to participate. I'm not sure, and I don't know if that's accurate, but we have heard that argument as well, and probably something we have to explore.
That's my only question, Mr. Chairman. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Utah for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the commissioners taking the time to be here today. I think this is a very informative hearing. First, Chairman Wheeler, in my state of Utah, we have over 750 active translators that relay signals to many rural communities that rely on broadcast television to obtain their newscasts, their public service announcements, and their entertainment. Now, with the increased reliance on mobile data, there's no doubt that we need to take steps to move forward with making more spectrum available. I've heard concerns that the spectrum repackaging that could result from the incentive auctions could have a negative impact on those rural communities that tend to be more dependent on broadcast television. What steps is the FCC taking to protect these viewers from possible negative impacts?
Well, Congressman, the first issue is how threatened should they feel, and the fact that they are living in rural areas where there is less of a demand for mobile spectrum may end up being a de facto shield for them. Mm-hmm. Secondly is, as the statute says, this is a secondary service, does not have protection. So the question is, how do you protect consumers, as you're suggesting, who rely on it? And that's why we've had a public notice and are seeking comments on the question of how do you get what the translator or LPTV station does in terms of content out, and how does new technology fit into that, such as digital use of the airwaves or whatever the case may be. But this is clearly an issue where we need to be focusing on what's the effect on the consumer, rather than what's the effect on the transmission medium, because you have told us how we should look at that transition medium.
Right. I appreciate that response. There's been a lot of back and forth on how the incentive auctions should be structured. I think most would agree it's imperative that we maximize participation both in the reverse auctions and the forward auctions. But Chairman Wheeler, I was wondering, what do you see as the best way for us to maximize participation and also revenue for the federal government in both of these auctions?
You know, before I took this job, I was in the business of doing business deals. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're talking about here. This is a business transaction that someone who has a license needs to make a business decision about. And how do you do that? Well, and what's our role? First of all, we need to make sure that we're getting relevant information on a timely basis into the hands of those parties to make that decision. And that's why we've scheduled the auction plan. We're saying in January we're going to begin laying out exactly what that kind of information needs to be. Secondly, I think it's incumbent on us to have an outreach program in which we make sure that small and large broadcasters understand how the system, how the program is going to work, what the economics could be, and maybe even begin to think in terms of what economic models might look like. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, what we're really doing is we're saying we want the marketplace to make a decision as to what is the highest and best use of spectrum. And the marketplace can't make that kind of decision until it's informed. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that that kind of information is in a timely manner available to those and to help them with that process.
Sure. Appreciate that. Commissioner Rosenworcel, I have a question for you about the Connect Ed program. You mentioned it briefly in your opening testimony. And you also mentioned that the current E-rate program has some bureaucratic inefficiencies built into it right now. What can the Commission do to maximize efficiency to get more bang for the buck? What can you do with your existing authority, or what do you need for Congress to do to change it to also increase those efficiencies?
Thank you very much for the question. I think this program is really important, and reinvigorating it is really important for education, infrastructure, and the economy. I think we can do more with this program just as it is. As my colleague Commissioner Pai noted, we do subsidize a whole bunch of old-fashioned services right now. We should phase those out over time and focus instead on capacity and bandwidth. And like you mentioned, we need to reduce bureaucracy. Bureaucracy gets in the way of small and often rural schools from participating in this program. Right. I'd like to see us encourage greater use of consortia to improve bulk buying power, and also have multi-year applications to reduce the administrative burden on schools that do participate.
All right. Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin by thanking former acting chair Clyburn. And during your tenure as acting chair, you finished the low power FM, and you guys did a wonderful job on it. You really did. And I want to thank all of you for that. But former acting chair, just now, Member Clyburn.
The commissioner formerly known as.
Yeah, formerly known. Yeah, that works. And you can have a sign for your name now. But you were extremely communicative. I love the way you'd reach out to us. And frankly, you were so extraordinary that I think every chairman, including the new one, should model themselves after that. We don't. It's very rare that we see that level of communication. So I just want to thank all of you. This really is a great board. You guys are really serious about the real issues. And I like how you filter out the politics that surrounds all of this. Keep it up. The next, I know that the quantile regression analysis has already been discussed to some point, but I just want to let you know that that's been a long time concern for me. I think some of the concerns that we had that it could actually displace or retard capital investment in rural America, when this is all about getting resources and capital into rural America because of its high cost. And so it really needs to be reviewed. And Chairman Wheeler, I appreciate, I've been told your comments on the record here today is that you understand this problem. I'll invite you and all of the commissioners out to rural Nebraska. You land in my district, then we go there. But it really is becoming a problem. There's one provider in Diller, Nebraska that we have used as the model for responsible rural telecom, because there's businesses there that now have high speed and are using it to monetize their businesses there, where they truly are a worldwide business, not just the 2 blocks of Diller, Nebraska. But there's a wind farm that they are having trouble, the wind farm that wants to go there, that needs a broadband hookup, and they're saying, with our cap, we don't have the money. We aren't allowed to use that money in that way. So it's having serious effects. It's just not that one house that's 30 miles back and, line in and out. It's really hurting rural economic development. So I want to go ahead, and then with my 2 minutes left, I want to ask the real question, and to Chairman Wheeler, and if either of the commissioners wish to step in, but I want to ask about a rule that concerns the video market. Many of us are worried that the price of cable subscriptions, and I'll tell you that's an often and frequent call to my congressional office, And the current market for video is seeing an expansion in the scope of current law wasn't necessarily intended to address. That's the FCC has defined buying group of NVPDs for the purpose of program access rules in a way that excludes the NCTC, essentially the only buying group out there. So are there plans by the Commission to look into this, to maybe change it? Do you think that the NCTC should be excluded from this process? Chairman Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. I've just become aware of the issues that have been raised about this and want to get all over it and would ask that we be able to get back to you, but the answer is we are now aware and will be dealing with it.
Any of the commissioners have concerns about the NCTC being excluded from this rule? Hearing none, Mr. Pai, you actually had an expression.
No good expression goes unpunished. No, I mean, I supported the notice that teed up a lot of the questions, and we teed up a lot of different questions. As you know, paragraphs 84 to 100 of that order listed all of the issues under consideration, and I look forward to working with Chairman Wheeler and my colleagues to ensure that the FCC takes the appropriate action to ensure that buying groups or other
Great.
entities are able to compete.
And others nodded. Mr. O'Reilly?
I'm sorry I didn't express.
Also known as the new guy?
The new guy, yes. I would have to agree with Chairman Wheeler. I don't have as much information on this, and I look to get up to speed on it, so I apologize that I don't.
Yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And Chairman Wheeler, welcome today to all the commissioners. Welcome again to, as we're announcing former positions and posts. Commissioner Clyburn, I know that you're very welcome here today. It's great to hear the recognition from my colleagues with your leadership and your work. And I don't want to speak for former Public Utility Commissioner Ray Baum either, but I'm going to invoke his name a bit. It's good to have another fellow utility commissioner here and a leader. For those of you that aren't aware, myself and Ray served at the same time on utility commissions as Commissioner Clyburn. We had a chance to do some great things together, and it's great to have you again in that leadership capacity, Commissioner Clyburn. Chairman Wheeler, I appreciate very much the conversation about quantile regression analysis. I think you'll see that there's many rural members of Congress or members that represent rural parts of America that are on this committee. As we look at this in encouraging investment in rural America, I hope that through all these deliberations and rulemaking that we don't lose sight of the fact that if we can make a mobile call from an airline, that we should be able to make it anywhere in rural America. And if technology is allowing for that to occur, I don't want to hear that we're not able to anymore. So thank you again for looking at this and making sure that rural America will not be left out, Mr. Chairman. With that being said, I would also encourage and was encouraged by the fact that in a recent report there was some conversation about the tribal coefficient, and would encourage that that is critically important as we roll out the reevaluation of the QRA. And lastly, I want to let you know that I'm planning on introducing a piece of legislation to include the elevation of the national tribal recognition of ONAP as a permanent office, and I would hope that we might be able to work with our colleagues to elevate that so that it reports directly to the chairman, especially with the evolution of what we're seeing with the extension of utilities across rural America, including tribal lands. Mr. Chairman, I'm intrigued very much by the conversation around the IP transition. I think Chairman Rogers, Chairman of Intelligence Committee, was asking about the importance of security in networks, that we not lose sight of the fact of the importance of protection of consumers and network security. As we're looking forward into future technologies, sometimes things that we've read about in fiction or we've seen in television, there's been a lot of concern recently about security of networks, about the infringement on individuals, peering eyes, if you will, sometimes into consumer information. And I'm intrigued by your direction to move forward with real-world experiments that will be coming forward. I'd like your thoughts on anything that you're aware of or that the FCC may be looking at with laser-based quantum encryption, point-to-point work that's happening right now with our national labs. It's been written about. I know it makes some people nervous, but it seems to me that as we're looking to protect consumer information and intellectual property, that the more advanced that we can make our networks with technology that's currently available that we may take to the commercial marketplace is something that I'd like to encourage and see, and just like to get your thoughts on that.
I just learned quantile regression analysis, and now you want me to know laser-based quantum encryption. I look forward to learning a lot about that. I don't mean to be light, but let me be specific on what I can comment on. Our networks need to be secure, period. What I was trying to say to Mr. Rogers is that the best way for attacking that is through the multi-stakeholder process and moving with dispatch, because the bad guys sure figure out a way to get around things, and that we need to make sure that our responses are flexible. We're working, obviously, with the President's executive order and the various steps that he is taking, or that the executive agencies are taking in that regard. But I happen to believe that two challenges of the IP transition is going to be the security of the networks and the privacy of the information. And if you go back to the comment that I was making, I believe, to Mr. Waxman about the trials need to be about measuring values, then we need to be addressing both of those issues inside that trial. And I look forward to learning more about how laser quantum can help that.
I appreciate it, Chairman. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, it wasn't too long ago that when the same idea was presented that we may be able to move data over light and lasers.
Right, exactly.
There were a lot of discouraging thoughts that were associated with that. But as we're moving now away from copper as a new medium, where even the ability to move data on fiber can't keep up with our processing speeds, if laser-based quantum encryption is good enough to keep national security secrets preserved, I would certainly hope that we find a way to extend these protections to consumers as well. And again, with the real threats that are taking place with theft with intellectual property, right now we know that it works point to point, but there are ways to make this work with advents of what we have available. This is a serious area that I have tried to take up with the Intelligence Committee. They were very cautious with their conversations with me until I presented with them with publications that have talked about this in open source and in an unclassified way. So I'm hoping that we might be able to look into this more and have a serious attempt to incorporate this into our day-to-day lives. Thanks again, Mr. Chairman, for that latitude.
The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to commend all the commissioners for being here today, and congratulations on your new role and your newly retired from role. Thank you for your service. And Commissioner Pai, I want to thank you for your work on the quantile regression analysis, and the comments that you made at the beginning of this, of your testimony was the question that Chairman Walden, I guess, was something that I have dealt with each and every day. In a district bigger than the state of South Carolina, I have a number of rural telecom, rural utilities that continue to face the uncertainty, as you mentioned, about the QRA, and I appreciate it. And so, Chairman Wheeler, thank you very much for your comments on that as well, and look forward to following up with you as those conversations and decisions move forward. I wanted to ask a quick question to Commissioner Pai about the issue of the ConnectEd and the E-rate program. Who is responsible for policing to make sure the E-rate program is being used as appropriately, making sure there's no abuse of the program?
Congressman, thanks for the question. In theory, the Universal Service Administrative Company, overseen by us, monitors it, but in practice, given the limited resources that USAC has and given the limited resources the FCC has to oversee USAC, there's not a great deal of transparency and accountability in the system.
A question I have with that is twofold. Number one, how do we ensure that there is no overlap of private sector service with E-rate funding and programs to make sure that we're not adding to government competition of the private sector? But number two, if USAC has identified a problem with a E-rate contractor or recipient, is there a way to police, or perhaps are there disbarment issues that you can talk about? Because I know one of the issues in Colorado is that there has been a company that is involved and has been morphed into a new company that has had significant issues with E-rate violations, and is now involved in another company in Colorado that is providing services to schools.
Yes, USAC has taken actions such as the type you've indicated, and as well, the Department of Justice in appropriate cases can take action where it suspects that something fraudulent has occurred. And I know that I'm quite sure I speak for my colleagues when I say that the FCC has no interest in doing anything but enforcing the rules against people who abuse the E-rate system. With respect to the first part of your question, I think it's critical as we think about reforming the E-rate program, in addition to restructuring the basic planks of it, that we ensure that at the end of the day, we don't supply E-rate funds to supplant or add to the problems of competitors who've taken the risk and invested private capital in deploying networks.
And Commissioner Rosenworcel, I know you talked about this as well. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I'd echo largely the sentiment of my colleague. We wouldn't want government funds to displace private sector funds. We want to be efficient with the limited dollars we have, and make sure we reach as many schools at as high speed as possible, including in rural Colorado. And with respect to oversight, we could always benefit from more oversight. When we find bad actors in a program, we have to take efforts to get them out.
Great, thank you. And Chairman Wheeler, a question I have, and this is maybe something that you need to get back to me on. Are you familiar with a report on Next Generation 911 that is being put together by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in connection with a blue ribbon panel that was convened by, let me get the name here, the FCC's Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council?
Right, that's CSRIC, yes.
Yeah, CSRIC. Are you familiar with a report that is about to come out in January?
I am not familiar with the report that's about to come out.
There was the blue ribbon panel that was put together at...
Right, I know that. I know
at
that,
CSRIC.
yes.
Apparently there is a blue ribbon panel. The report is coming out in January, and there are some questionable findings in this report, and I would hope that perhaps the FCC, because I believe some of the findings are not in line with FCC ideas at all, if you could take a look at that report before it's issued and public, to make sure that when we issue a report that has the stamp seal approval of the federal government, that it's in line with the FCC directives and beliefs. I'd be
consider that done.
Thank you very much. And a final question in my time regarding the IP transition issues. Heading in a good direction, but and there's significant strides being made to transition to IP. But it's talking about rural America again. How do we further encourage this transition in a way that ensures consumers remain served in the long run, particularly in rural America?
I'm sorry, the consumers be served in the long run?
In the long run, particularly in rural America.
Yeah, and it is going to be very important, for instance, in these trials, that we have trials in rural areas to begin to answer those kind of questions. I mean, you can't go to New York City or, someplace like this and run a trial and say that it applies, in cities in your district. And so that's going to be one of the criteria that we're looking at.
Thank you. Yield back my time.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Wheeler, I came to Congress with a 30-year background in the auction business, so that's how was my profession for 30 years before I got here, so I've got a great interest in any time that we try to conduct an auction for anything, and it's concerning to me about this reverse auction thing, because I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to work, but can you provide us with a timeline of actions that need to occur before the incentive auctions would begin?
Yes, sir. We're going to, in January, which in next month's open meeting, we are going to have a presentation that is going to lay out both the timeline and the policy issues that need to be decided and some recommendations on those. Then in the spring, we're going to be voting on a report and order that solicits offers to do trials, sets up a measurement scheme for them, and begins to address the kinds of policy issues that will be tangential to all of that. and then we will go forth with trials.
Can you also tell me what the FCC is doing to ensure that the maximum amount of revenue will be generated through these auctions, which was always a concern of mine as an auctioneer?
And believe me, one of ours as well, because we have the responsibility not only to fund FirstNet and the auction activities themselves, but also to contribute to pay down the federal deficit. And I think the key to how you can maximize revenue, it comes down to multiple things. One is we've got to be able to attract broadcasters. We've got to have something, as I was saying previously, that are rules that are understandable, are rules that we're actually being aggressive and helping people understand the economic impact of them, because as you know, you're only going to bid to the point that your spreadsheets say it's going to be making sense. So that's the first thing, that we've got to attract broadcasters. We also have this perverse challenge here that we also have to be freeing up spectrum.
Have to be what?
Freeing up spectrum.
Which requires people to put spectrum into the auction.
There's the key. So you have to provide the appropriate incentive to get them to free up.
And do you foresee that happening? From what I talked to and people I talked to, I don't know that that's going to happen in as large a way as what.
So the Congress told us to make it happen. And we are going to do our damnedest to deliver on those instructions. And I believe that we will be able to fulfill the challenge that we have been given. And in no way, shape, or form do I underestimate the magnitude of it. I have spent more time on this issue in the last 39 days than any other issue. And I know my colleagues all feel the same way on this. We understand that we're biting off a huge chunk here.
And there's an article where you were speaking in Ohio, and to quote out of the article, the protection of competition, Mr. Wheeler said, would apply to the coming auctions of additional airwaves or spectrum for mobile broadband. In April, the Justice Department told the FCC that it could help to protect competition by ensuring that the two largest companies, AT&T and Verizon, were not allowed to use their financial might to buy up all the available spectrum being auctioned, shutting out smaller carriers. So how do you balance that? How do you decide I want to get the most money for my product over here, but I want to limit my bidders over here? How does that?
I also think that, as you know, the more people you get to the auction, presumably the better result. And so we want to make sure that we are creating an auction marketplace that will attract as many people as possible, not just the giants. As a former entrepreneur, we want to make sure that we have smaller wireless companies. We want to make sure there are entrepreneurial opportunities in here. And that's one of the things that's most interesting about what we've recently put out for public notice, the proposal from the Competitive Carriers Association, the Rural Carriers Association, and the NTCA, the Rural Wireline Association, on talking about smaller economic areas so that they could bid for a smaller piece of geography rather than a humongous piece, because for entrepreneurs, for smaller carriers, they can target their activities. They can take something that is a consumable bite rather than be forced to go out and
But they also have to put together a patchwork quilt to make their system work correct, what they can buy through the auction. They have to be able to.
So they can buy their areas, they can buy other smaller areas rather than having to buy. This is not a decision. I just want to be clear. We've put this out for comment, but it is certainly a very interesting idea. But
if they need A, B, and C, and they get A and B, but then they can't get C, then A and B weren't worth anything.
But that's kind of the history of the wireless industry. We're about to conduct our 96th auction, and and I've been in them from the outset. And traditionally, that kind of situation has occurred, and then an aftermarket then develops in which various players say, okay, how can I reorganize for the most efficiency?
Okay, I'm beyond my time by quite a little bit, so if I had any time, I'd yield it back.
The gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the commissioners for being here today. Commissioner Clyburn, I'm going to direct my questions to you. I have an issue that has been raised from my sheriffs back home in North Carolina, and it has to do with one of the points that you made in your opening testimony, and I'll just read from your opening statement. We adopted an order to reform inmate calling services to finally provide relief to millions of families and 2.7 million children who have been paying unreasonably high rates to stay connected with incarcerated loved ones. My sheriffs back home do have some concerns on this issue, and so they would like me to pose some questions to you on this issue in regard to security measures that they will now be putting in place. Certainly, they want to be able to provide, you know, access and information and the ability to communicate with family members. But they are concerned that this order or reform regulation is saying that basically their ability to put forward call blocking through the prison, is that an issue? Is that looked upon as something that we want to veer away from?
So let me start again. Thank you, and it's a pleasure meeting a Carolinian.
Absolutely. Yes.
You're right. We might argue a bit about which.
Yeah.
Right.
That's okay though. We're brothers, cousins, sisters.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. So let me start with the latter in terms of the call blocking concerns that some of the sheriffs and persons who run jail facilities mentioned. So as it relates to that particular item, I want to assure you that nothing within anything that we have delivered in this order prevents any type of security security needed type of a blocking. Okay. So if you know, a judge or a witness or something you know, is potentially at risk, then yes, these providers can block calls. The call blocking comes into play when there is not a business relationship with us. If someone is doing business with somebody else and then a supplier, another supplier is blocking them, that is when we have some disconnects with our rules. But when it comes to security protocols, that is in place. So you mentioned what is at the epicenter of our reasoning for reform, that family members, that those who represent those who are incarcerated, not everybody incarcerated is guilty. And those who are trying to help rehabilitate those inmates have complained to us for a number of years, for well over 10 years, that the ability to communicate was just financially outrageous, that it was an unaffordable regime. So what we did after 10 long years was act. And we looked at and reminded ourselves with the Communications Act in terms of universal service principles put forward, that is the providing of just and reasonable rates for all. And so we put in a mechanism that will provide that. And what we also did, not only providing a means for just and reasonable rates for those families and others who use the phone service, but providing the means for a just and reasonable rate of return for those carriers. At the same time, built in that just and reasonable rate of return for carriers is the amount of money needed to provide state-of-the-art security protocols. So nothing within the framework in terms of what we, you know, put forth in terms of the order and the further order that will deal with intrastate rates will compromise security protocols, but it will bring more certainty and more, I guess I would say, again, just affordability for those who are making calls to the incarcerated.
They're also concerned about the cost involved, and you know, if you can give some guidance in anticipation of the cost that they will have to incur as a result of this. Certainly, again, wanting to make sure that everyone is protected and the security is there, but and also, would you consider at the local level, the local jails maybe being exempt until they can, you know, come up with a plan of action?
So one of the things that we have put forth in this engagement is the capacity for any provider that is under distress. They can apply for a waiver process, you know, for a waiver. So that capacity is within and means. And so they do have the ability to do so. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is when we came up with this particular rate structure, we looked at a number of cost studies and cost models that included a wide array of facilities and came up actually with a cost structure that was much higher than some of the petitioners wanted us to. But we thought that we needed to take into account facilities large and small in order to come up with a rate structure that we think it strikes the right balance.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to, and certainly will be working with my law enforcement back home, working with the commission on this issue and the subcommittee. So thank you so much. I look forward to that.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady yields back, and seeing no other members to ask questions, I want to thank the commission for being with us today, and I know that Chairman Walden does the same, and I also want to thank the commission for changing your time today for your meeting to be able to be here, and I understand your meeting is at 2 o'clock, so we appreciate you accommodating the committee to appear before us today. And seeing no further business to come before the committee stands adjourned.